Thank you. We could use some rain, so we'll keep you up to date on that. March is Women's History Month, and we're celebrating here on Eye on Northeast Kansas by inviting some of the groundbreaking women in our community to the couch for conversations. Today, we welcome two women who've changed the conversation regarding women who've experienced domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. Marilynn Ault founded the YWCA Battered Women's Task Force. It is now known as the Center for Safety and Empowerment. And Sharon Sullivan is a Washburn professor who started the Topeka and Shawnee County Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Melissa.
And Marilynn, when did the Battered Women's Task Force start?
Well, actually, the first thing that started was in 1973 was a sexual assault counseling program. And that started because of a man. And it was a fellow who worked at the court services, Leo Taylor was his name. And he called the YWCA and said, would you get a group of women together? I'm really concerned about how poorly rape victims are treated and what they have to go through. And I think we could do better. Would you get a group of women together? And 30 women showed up for that meeting. It helped that he was tall and very handsome, but moving right along, what he had heard was there was a program in Wichita that had just started. And so we got a carload of those women, and they went down and spent the day to find out what they were doing in Wichita, and came back, and then we started, called it the Sexual Assault Counseling Program. Didn't have any money, so we had to get volunteers to volunteer. We did training. We got staff from Meningers to come in and talk about if you've been traumatized, what might that be like? How can you help somebody who's been traumatized? We worked out with the Shawnee Community Crisis Hotline that they would take the call originally and then call one of our people who would show up if it were a brand new sexual assault and the woman was at the hospital going through trying to get evidence in case the case went to court. And
none of that existed back then.
No.
The SANE SART programs and things we have now.
No.
And then leading up to BWTF, what was missing when it came to women who were experiencing domestic violence?
So that happened later, and it really came from a couple of, I think they were volunteer YWCA members that were sent to the national meeting, and they came back to Topeka and said, hey, there are domestic violence programs that YWCAs are doing in other parts of the country. I think we ought to look into that. So that's how one started earlier than the other, and then we finally merged the two programs.
And now we come through the years and we realize that human trafficking is an issue. Sharon, how did you develop that interest, and why did you see it as something we needed to be paying attention to in this area?
So I was supporting some students about 20 years ago now who were having a Slavery Awareness Week. I thought I knew what that meant. I got there and I didn't know what it meant. They were saying, you know, Dr. Sullivan, it's happening right here in Kansas. It's happening in Topeka. And I was like, really? I need to do my research on that. And once I started looking at it, I realized that it was on the continuum of work I was already doing around violence against women and girls. And at that time, there weren't very many people in the community doing that work. There were about 3 or 4 of us in Kansas doing the work, and so I just kind of tagged on and tried to make myself an expert on it.
What is the challenge in addressing human trafficking?
I think the challenge is that people do not understand the ways that vulnerabilities make us vulnerable to all different kinds of abuse and exploitation, including human trafficking. So I very much see sexual assault, domestic violence, these are all part of human trafficking. And so helping the community understand the vulnerabilities of people in our community, that these are our neighbors, our daughters, our sons, our sisters and brothers, I think has been the hardest thing. People want to think that this is something that happens to people over there instead of it happening right here in our backyards.
Well, we want to talk about how we've been able to get to where we are today and what challenges remain. So sit tight, because we're going to have more from our conversation with Sharon and Marilynn next.